We have this
No
tweet
idea.
from Chris Hayes. He says, was just checking on what happened in the 1946 midterms as the nation readjusted after a historic society-wide disruption and inflation was 8%. Don't Google it. So I Googled it.
Yeah, of course.
And we found that the 1946 election resulted in Republicans picking up 55 seats to win majority control. Well, times they are a-changin'. It's very different these days. The parties represent very different ideas. But I think it is fair to say, yeah, I mean, maybe that much. Could you imagine if we get blindsided by a Republican supermajority in the House? How many seats would they need to win for a supermajority?
Well, there's no such thing as a House supermajority, right? Like, because it's just it's 50% plus, yeah, right. Whoever gets 50% plus one can vote. It's a Senate supermajority would be 60, I think, or 61, or no, 60. And I don't think that's even conceivable given the map.
So,
right.
How many seats do you guys think the Republicans are going to need to pick up to keep not doing anything?
Man,
probably all of them.
You know, but hold on, hear me out. If the Republicans actually are
I'm being
able,
a cynic. But hold
on, no, let's be real. Let's be real. If they're able to pick up like 55 seats and just change the shape of the House of the House of Representatives, then they'll probably do nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not going to be able to do anything meaningful because Biden's going to veto it, right? We're still going to have a Democratic president until 2024.
They can impeach him.
I don't know. I could see him
They
accidentally.
could.
They can investigate.
That's what they can do. They can do investigations.
They should make the January 7th committee.
Yeah.
And I actually think,
one better.
I have heard whispers that Kevin McCarthy is actually going to like go hard on the investigations. And there's sort of like the Democrats have pissed him off so much over the past like 2 years that he's actually going to go like make them really pay for it a bit.
I don't believe it.
I don't know. That's what I hear.
If they make the mistake of making McCarthy Speaker of the House, he's going to be like, I'm going to go after these investigations. And then he's going to be standing tall. And the moment they're like, and McCarthy has it, he's going to go, oh. And then he's just going to be like, I'm tired.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's more McConnell.
I worry about it, but who knows? I mean, it could be. I mean, that's what they're going to do. Like, I mean, I know they're not going to. I think there is definitely like a lot of resistance. Like I heard Matt Gaetz talking about this. Like there's a lot of resistance into doing what the Paul Ryan Republican House did during Obama, which was just pass a bunch of bills that they knew never were going to go anywhere, and then find themselves. Subpoenas.
Hunter Biden testify under oath.
Lots and lots of subpoenas. Get to the bottom of RussiaGate. Get to the bottom of Hunter Biden.
Joe Biden testify under oath, like they made Trump do.
Yeah. No, just embarrassing investigations.
They would still call it unprecedented.
Sure. Here's what happens. McCarthy, primary the guy. McConnell, whatever, Senate, I don't care who they are, just get them out. Use primaries across the board. Get rid of everybody. Bye-bye.
I'm looking up.
Ideally.
I'm trying to put my mind in the heads of people in 1946 when they did this. It was post-World War II, so they're just getting out of this traumatic World War. Harry Truman. Was Truman Republican?
Truman was a Democrat. Truman had not been elected, right? He was a vice president, and he was, when Franklin Roosevelt died right before the end of World War II, he became president. So,
what caused all these? What caused all these people to get voted in? Was it? I mean, just the end of the war must have been such a paradigm shift.
A lot of the sitting leaders got thrown out of office, right? Winston Churchill got thrown out of office.
Can I just say something real quick?
Election in England.
Don't the Democrats claim the parties switched in the late 50s?
Yes, they claim that during the Civil Rights era, the parties switched.
So how is it?
After.
So if the parties switched, what Chris Hayes is actually saying when he says don't Google it is that he believes Democrats are going to win?
Yeah, I think
I
don't know.
It's more that he thinks that like the party in power is going to take a beating.
Yeah.
Right.
Like basically this kind of stuff. People are not happy and want something different. And that happened, right? Winston Churchill literally is the guy who won the war, the guy who's the hero of Britain, and he got tossed out in a general election.
Yep.
They hated him in the early days because they're like, all he talks about is war, and he's like, I'm telling you, the Germans are going to declare war. And he's like, that silly man. And then finally, when the war broke out, they're like, we need him now. They brought him in when they won the war, like we don't need him anymore. And he's like, war though.
Oh man, peace in our time, huh? What an amazing quote.
That's Neville Chamberlain.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Peace in
That's
our
why
time.
I read peace and prosperity because they're not the same thing.
Great book that was a fascinating take on World War II from Britain's perspective called The Phony Victory by Peter Hitchens. And his basic thesis is Britain was, in effect, one of the losers of the war. That Britain, prior to the war, had some pretensions of being a great power, and post-war, they were a vassal of the United States.
Yep. And they better know it.
And they basically found themselves in a war situation where they were basically doomed. Their only hope was the United States coming to save them. And oddly enough, Franklin Roosevelt and the United States managed to extract major concessions from Britain throughout that period when they were in that really difficult period in like 1940, in order for it to be willing to help the United Kingdom.
What kind of
We
stuff?
were still not that happy about the war. Yeah.
Bases.
Oh, they gave us their military bases?
They had military bases in like Newfoundland and like in Canada, and we just said, you want our old destroyers, like our old retro, not very useful destroyers, give us your land, give us your military bases.
Whoa.
And
then what did the king, was it a king at the time? Was it?
Yeah, well, they had that was under Chamberlain, right, when they were starting to do, no, that was probably under Churchill when they were doing Lend-Lease. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure.
But who was the reigning monarch at the time?
King George.
So was George signing over the land?
No, it wasn't up to him, right? It's like, at that point, it's still a constitutional monarchy with
technically
prime minister dominating the.
Technically, the king could.
Yeah, but it was still at that point where it's like the prime minister is running the government of Britain, and so it was on Neville Chamberlain and Churchill to make the decision. But I mean, they were in a terrible position. I mean, they found a way to stop a seaborne invasion by Hitler's Germany, but they had no hope. I mean, they got kicked out of continental Europe, had to flee from Dunkirk, and the miracle of Dunkirk was that they managed to evacuate most of their forces. And I mean, they had no hope of trying to reconquer continental Europe. I mean, and it's one thing. It's funny. Like, actually, I've read some of my grandfather's letters from that period before the United States entered the war, after Dunkirk, and he's doing the calculations on like America entering the war, and it is just staggeringly awful. Wow. Like, because at that point, also the Soviet Union's not in the war against Germany,
right? And
so people are talking about the United States entering, and it's like they're not going. There's no way that we could possibly do this, because it's just us versus Nazi Germany, and we're having to invade on a seaborne invasion,
which is crazy.
Yeah, which my grandfather's conclusion was like, this would be insane. Like, we can't do it.
Man, if you think about it, storming the beaches was nuts.
Yeah,
I think it would have made no sense at all had the Soviet Union not already been in the war and been grinding up the German army.
Yeah, I mean, people often forget how the communists saved the world, and then they just malign those poor Soviets.
Poor Soviets.
But that's actually something they often say. Like,
I know.
Hey, man, we helped in World War II, and it's like, yeah, but you killed a ton of people before World War II, so
doesn't make you the good guys.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah. Also forgetting the fact that they were the ones who wanted to keep working with Hitler until he betrayed them.
Yeah,
right.
Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah.
When the Germans went into Russia, Soviet.
They're like, hey, wait, you're not supposed to attack us. I guess we have no choice.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. Like, how many tens of millions of people did the U.S. kill in the early 1900s? Was it none?
I think so.
I mean,
I don't know.
Obviously, people died at the hands of the United States, but it wasn't tens of millions, right? Yeah. Well, you had the Nazis. We know what they did. And you had the Soviets. We know what they did. And then here we are, like, let's team up with one of them against the other. It's the craziest thing to me that, like, they were both just extremely awful.
Yeah.
But then we ended up having to fight, 60, 70 years, a Cold War, proxy wars all over the planet, because the Soviets were very much bad guys.
Yep.
Crazy. Really, it comes down to, the fact that Hitler declared war on the United States. That, like, if you're looking at there was another very fascinating bit of this book that I thought was really interesting. There's that window between December 7th, 1941, and I think 4 days later, where Hitler declares war on the United States. And Britain was freaking out because they thought we were just going to go to war with Japan. And that's where all our resources were going to go. That's where all the military investment was going to go, and Britain was just going to have to hold out Nazi Germany on its own. And then Hitler declared war on us, and all of a sudden, like, they just breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, I mean, the U.S. was like, we don't really need to worry about war with Japan because we got nukes. We need our ground forces in Europe.
Your timing's wrong. We didn't have nukes fully developed until like 45, and that it wasn't obvious in 1941 that was going to be like a game changer.
They had a meeting, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. I think Stalin was involved too. It might have just been Churchill and Roosevelt. They decided that they were going to focus American war efforts. They all agreed on Europe. We're not going to worry about Japan until later.
Well, I mean, they just agreed that the United States would take the ore in Japan, and that most of the American resources would go. But I mean, we built a hell of a carrier force. Like, we spent a lot of money and energy on Japan too.
I think strategically, Europe was more allies and more forces to help. If you liberate Europe, you get more assistance in the rest of the war.
Right, and I mean, I think it was ultimately a priority. I think, like, over Japan and the Pacific theater, but Japan still got a ton of attention from.
It's crazy how much Japan lost because they went to war in this way?
Oh, it was a horrible, horrible decision. They were doomed from the outset in terms of their industrial capacity. I mean, more nerdy stuff, but like from basically like we dwarfed their naval production by like 10 to 1. Just for their theater, right? Like we were able to also produce everything we needed for Europe and then dwarf Japan's naval production like 10 to 1. And it's a naval war. Like carriers are everything. And we just, they produced maybe like 6 workable carriers when we produced like 50 or 60 or something. I mean, it was just
I heard that
crazy.
they were on the verge of surrendering before we dropped the bombs on them. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were on the, it's not clear which caused the surrender, was it the Russians finally declaring war on Japan, or and deciding to invade through Manchuria, or the bombs, right? Because the first bomb went off and they didn't surrender.
Yeah.
And then Russia declared war?
I think I'm not sure of the exact timing. Whether
they may have been deciding
before
on
or after the first bomb.
Wow.
It may have been a meeting of the Japanese saying like, who do we want to be occupied by?
Yeah, they might. I think it was really once the Russians invaded. I think that might have been plus the bomb, but the Russians invading was sort of like, oh, we're screwed, right?
Yeah.
We lose.
Did they organize the American government and the Russians like we're going to drop a bomb when you invade? Like we're going at them with everything?
I don't remember if that was it. I think honestly at that point Russia might have been opportunistic because Russia wanted a seat at the table with Japan to negotiate territorial concessions, and so Stalin might have been kind of opportunistic of like, oh, we think this war's probably going to wrap up soon. Let's get in on the game and ensure that our territorial claims are respected.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.